Souse us therefore in the powdering tub of thy mercy,
that we may be tribes fit for the heavenly table.
Welcome, Meatsmiths. You are listening to a Meatsmith podcast.
Restoring husbandry to prosperity by means of the traditions of our fathers. This dialogue picks up where we left off in our last episode's conversation. You can find part 1 on our website, YouTube, or iTunes. If the content resonates with you, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating a small monthly pledge. This goes directly toward more free media headed your way. Thanks for staying tuned for part 2. I wrote down here, and I'm ripping a lot of this stuff off of other people that I've kind of helped condense my thoughts a little bit, and I will link to a handful of videos that are on YouTube as well that can kind of help with a little bit. But one of the gentlemen I've listened to is Pat Flynn. And he's a recent convert. He was an atheist and now he's Catholic. Oh. Anyway, he has a neat story, but he was recently on the Catholic Man show, and he's got his own highly successful podcast.
Oh, cool.
I think he's
got
a big following. He does fitness and lots of things. Mm-hmm. I think he has like Theology Thursday or something. Like I think he's got way more podcasts than we do. But anyway, he phrased it like this: there's a functional concept of the good in traditional natural law, and
that's right.
That makes that, I think that helps me understand what you're saying is that when we observe the order, which hierarchy just means sacred order.
That's right.
In the Greek.
Sacred government,
that we end up with better things. We end up with better eggs, better chicken mommies.
The good life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything's just better.
Yeah. That's why I like the definition of morality as being practical reasoning. Mm-hmm. It's because it's not just that something immoral is bad or wicked. It's that it runs up against the natural laws. It doesn't work. Mm-hmm. This is why the 10 Commandments, they are functionally a part of planet Earth and its culture. Mm-hmm. Like they are utilities. Like they are electricity. Like it works. Yeah. It's not just an arbitrary moral code. Yeah. It's like this is how life continues. Yeah. If we live this way.
Yeah. Pat Flynn also talks about essentialism, so which are a couple of his metaphysical assumptions to the natural law, and one of them is essentialism, which is things have an essence. Mm-hmm. They have a predictable, which I guess we were saying this already, but
a nature
that you can depend on, that you can look at something and say that is this thing. It's not like an acorn will become an oak tree. Yeah. It won't become a giraffe.
Right.
Okay. So that helps us in our language. And again, modernity has flushed that down the toilet. But farmers don't operate this way.
No.
Farmers know if I give X amount of feed to this animal, I will get this yield. Mm-hmm. If I put this seed in this kind of ground, I'll get this kind of plant. Yeah. If I add a little compost and fertilizer, then I'm like, they act as if there are predictable ends to their actions. Yeah. Because they can count on a seed being a certain kind of seed.
Right. Doing what it does.
Yeah. Exactly. And so and a logical consequence of that is that we are actually happier when we observe those things. Yeah. So like a saw, he said, is happiest when it is sawing.
I like that.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah. I am happiest when it is sawing.
Yeah, exactly. And so is everyone else around it.
Yeah.
And a hammer, you know, like it shouldn't try to be a saw. It should try to be a really good hammer.
Yeah.
And
and that's not to say that it has a will or an emotion of happiness, obviously. Right. It's to say it has a final cause, an end for which it is designed. Mm-hmm. And all of creation quivers in, joyful harmony when you drive in a big 16 penny nail with 2 blows. It's beautiful.
I know.
I mean, that hammer is singing the praises of the Lord when you do that.
Yeah. Well, and that feeds into his second metaphysical assumption, which is teleology.
Yeah.
So essentialism is a pencil is best a pencil when it is a pencil. Like it is happiest and it is most a pencil when it is doing when it's sharp and there's See, it's not exactly a happy pencil right now because my children have chewed off the eraser and I hate that. And I've gone through many packets of erasers.
Yeah.
So it's not and they've chewed this eraser off too. So
it's deformed
it's not the best pencil right now. But then teleology is that it is directed. It has a forward future direction. So we actually want an acorn to become an oak tree, and that it is not a good acorn. And then we can make claims on, and we can make value judgments on how well an acorn has become an oak tree, or maybe it dies halfway because it had some disease or something. And that's not an imposition of our arbitrary social construction.
Yeah.
It's very observable.
Yeah, it's real. It's like there's this great joke, and I encounter this. The irony is the thing that is an imposition is your precipitous emotional regard of that thing, absent or in lieu of your rational regard of it. Because your reason is more receptive. You're going to take the cues. From the nature of the thing itself. Your emotion is you're not in a receptive mode, depending on the emotion that is overwhelming you. And I experienced this particularly when I was learning how to slaughter. I had, just by virtue of slaughtering animals, before we started doing it as a business, I had developed habits of controlling animals in certain ways. That were the result of, this creates a rational analysis. This creates less stress when I do it this way, or this renders a quicker kill when I do it this way, or better pluck, or whatever it is. But when I started slaughtering for people who did not have as much slaughter experience as I did, but they did have a very strong pet-like connection to the livestock that I was slaughtering, they would want to tell me how to do it in accord with their paradigm, which was emotional, and it wasn't good for the animal. And I didn't know because I'm such an agreeable person. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do it this way, which only confirmed in my mind, oh, that's why I don't do this. It's because I don't want to torture animals to death.
Right. Because you have a certain amount of compassion for them.
Well, exactly.
Right?
That's why I think the emotion, at least that particular emotion in the context of slaughter, man, it just goes to show that the idea is not that you erase your emotions.
Right.
It's that they be ordered to reason. You actually be in control of them. So you can decide how you are going to be compassionate, or when you are going to evoke or even, foment those emotions. It's when they happen without your reason. It's when it's just a reaction, a precipitous reaction, like you tripped and fell into the emotion of whatever it is.
Right.
Compassion.
Yeah.
That's when they get, you've switched the order around. You need to be led by your reason. So I remember, like doing this for people, particularly with chickens. They wanted me to cradle their chicken.
Yeah.
Like a puppy. And I'm not sure puppies like it so much, but chickens definitely don't. Because my way to hold chickens is by their legs upside down. And yeah, I guess it looks not tender because we associate tenderness with the way we hold a baby. We cradle it, we nurture it that way. But that's because the baby is a baby. The chicken's a chicken, and we're about to kill it. And so it's a different thing. It's actually a good idea to hold it upside down. You'll notice it stops struggling. It actually calms down. Chickens are not calmed by being smothered in your arms. That freaks them out, unless they're used to it because you hold them like a baby all the time,
right,
and you've overcome their natural aversion to be held in the arms of a predatory animal, which you are in the eyes of the chicken. So you can overcome that through habit, but you want to hold it upside down. And this. This is the order of nature that is clearly perceivable. And it has resonance, that has analogy throughout all interactions with living things. And there's this funny anecdote from Mrs. Beeton that I love about Charles V, Emperor Charles V. He was Holy Roman Emperor in the 16th century. He was the first guy on whose kingdom the sun never set. So he had... it was all the kingdom is in Italy, Germany, Austria, even Spain and the Americas, German settlements in America and Spanish, way back when. And so this guy is the emperor of, the West. He's kind of a big deal. And he was also very pious. So he would go to Mass frequently. And one day he was walking to Mass, full of spiritual thoughts and preparing himself to go to the Dominican cloister and have some contemplative, prayer times. But ahead of him, there was this pig squealing, death-curdling, as pigs are wont to do, a little pig just screaming, which is such, if you've handled piglets before, it's like it echoes in your soul. It's so loud. It's the opposite of contemplative prayer.
It was a little jolting.
Yeah, which is what Emperor Charles V was going for. So this wasn't working, and it was coming from a piglet that was held by a guy in front of him as they were going up the road. And the emperor yells out, like, "Don't you know how to hold a pig?" And he's like, "No, I wish someone would tell me because this is horrible." And he told him... It
was a kid, wasn't it?
I think it was a child, yeah, like a peasant kid with a piglet, not knowing who was behind him, not knowing that it was the emperor of his known world at that time. And so Emperor Charles says, "You got to turn it upside down, hold it upside down, and you'll see how silent it will be." And so the kid goes and he holds it upside down, and as you know, the pig will stop screaming when you hold them upside down. Okay. So it's actually a great way to pick up wieners, When you go, if you're not farrowing and you're buying wieners and putting them into a crate, grab a back leg. It's easiest to catch them by a back leg, but it's also easiest to hold them that way. Just hold them upside down, and they will be quiet. They will be less stressed. And I think they're a little weirded out. What's going on here? But put your hand, just touch their belly at all. Touch them, and even in the most tender, loving way you can imagine, and slowly bring them up into a cradle in your arms, and they will scream like you are killing them, like you are torturing them. It's unreal. So hold them upside down. Anyway, the pig immediately stopped screaming, and the peasant turned around, and he's like, you have more experience handling swine because you know how to do it better. And the joke is that this is the emperor of the world, surrounded by courtiers and politicians. He knows how to handle swine. Yeah. So there is, because it's, as one of his successors would say, the duty of the emperor is to protect his people from their politicians, which back then would have been the bureaucrats. And, well, not really. Bureaucrats are a modern thing, but so but you know what I mean. There is this resonance with the order all the way across. Anyway,
yeah,
that's just a fun anecdote.
It's a good story.
You want to hold pigs upside down too. That's what I'm trying to say.
It probably helped him become a better emperor. I mean, that's what natural law does in some ways, is you're in the middle of a task, whether it's feeding pigs or dressing a baby or making lunch or something, and you are observing. If you are in a quiet state of mind, you're observing some truism. This is how I've experienced. Or maybe I'll be disciplining a child. Again, emotion free.
Yeah, that's the key.
Which is hard for me.
That is the key.
And I'm getting better at it. But it's taken time. Anyway, if I'm in an emotion free state, I'll pick up on something that I'm telling them. Some way that they have to live life. You know, like you can't do that when you're growing up. Like to be a big girl, you got to do this or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I could use the same advice, you know, because only I'm on an adult scale. So it actually has worse ramifications if I act in this toddler way. Yeah. You know, or a 10-year-old boy way or whatever the case may be. But, or I'll, you know, I'll be cooking and I'll cut something a certain way or frying something a certain way or, like I've observed like a tenderloin is perfect when it's crunchy on the outside and tender on the inside.
Almost raw.
And I'm like, oh, that's how humans have to be perfect, you know? Or I'll just come up with some, like I'll just observe. And I guess we also learn by analogy. Yeah. I think I've said this before, and that's part of the natural law too, is humans really, that's why we like story and we observe orders and stories. Anyway, I'll observe something in nature and then I'll say, I think I'm supposed to be that way myself. And then I'll just try to keep going on my little life and incorporate that new truth into my consciousness and my conscience. Yeah. Anyway. I forgot why I mentioned that.
Yeah. Well, I think about that with pigs. I think I should be more piggish sometimes.
Well, I know why I was saying that, because the emperor, in order to be a good emperor, he had to kind of be a good swineherd first. You know, like you don't climb the ranks unless you start being a really good householder and then a good...
Get your house in order. I think that's part of that anecdote.
Okay.
Is that idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also that courtiers can act like swine sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
I find that, you know, pigs are very interesting because they are so smart as quadrupeds go. Way smarter. Well, you know, they're oriented for different purposes. So they're omnivores. They need a little more brain power, more memory, more power of memory, because they could technically eat everything. And so they need to remember not to eat some things that are toxic. I think that's the general, at least that's one of the utilities of being a smart creature. Makes you a better omnivore. So in their groups, their social groups, they're so ordered. It's really amazing. They don't break those rules at all. And they will actually... You know, like I've said, if you go to a class, you'll hear me wax on about this way too long, but they have a hierarchy. They have the alpha pig, the beta pig, all the way down. And I don't know any more Greek letters, so that's all you get. You know, if there's 5 pigs, it's first, second, third, fourth, fifth. And you can observe this order, and they don't violate it. And it's usually expressed by rights to the food bowl. And one thing I like about pigs is that they do not respond to bullying at all. They do not respond to loudness or force, whereas humans do. We because we can violate our order, we can our own natures, we can do that, and they don't. So when you come to a sounder of pigs at a farm, it is not the case that the loudest and the biggest pig is the boss. Sometimes it is, but it's never the loudest pig. So the pig that is always yelling for food and always competing for food. So he's the most vocal and he's pushing other pigs out of the food bowl constantly, or attempting to. You got to watch that. You got to watch the full conflict. See how successful his bullying is. And you will find that he's not the boss pig. The other pigs don't follow him. He is compensating for the fact that he is number 5 in the hierarchy of the sounder. Whereas the quiet pig that without argument and without challenge is eating peacefully from its own food bowl all by itself, that's the boss pig.
Yeah.
That's because it does not have to fight for its place. They did that way back when they were littles, when they were pharaohed. Literally in the order of who was suckling where on the mama, on the sow. And that's why we have that phrase, it's sucking hind titty, is the pig at the back is going to be the smaller. Because I think those dugs, as it were, actually don't produce as much milk. Oh. Or at least as nutritive or something, as those closer to the head of the sow. So it's frequently the case that the boss pig is actually among the smaller pigs of the group. It's not the big one, and it's definitely not the loud one. But what it is the best pig. And so it gets number one. And I don't know what makes it the best pig. Yeah. I don't know why I don't know.
They're very admirable pigs, though.
The intricacies of that. And I could know it the more I watch it. I just know how it manifests is that pig gets uncontested access to a food bowl. And when it's done, it walks away and the other pigs will go in. But they don't even go up, If a pig violates for a second the private access to the food bowl that pig number one has, it doesn't take much. It's just like a throw of the head, and that other pig will get out of there, even if it's the bigger pig, because they're acknowledging they are always obedient to the order, because they know that in the order, in the hierarchy, is governance. That's how they. Well, I don't know if they know this, but that's how they survive. That's how life goes well for them.
So how come we don't do the same thing?
I don't know.
Pigs and toddlers, they are always...
Because of our freedom.
Yeah. How many people do you know you would say truly share your back to the land values? Or your passion for home-scale craft meat curing? Or simply love the multifaceted beauty of a good meal as obsessively as you do? Maybe a handful? At farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we've created an online community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world and a platform for them to learn from and inspire one another. In addition to our major semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Pacific Northwest homestead, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources years deep now, for you to dive deeper into your food journey with. And both our classes and online program include access to our private community Facebook page for your continued education and fellowship. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you, putting the knife in your hand, article by article, and comment thread by comment thread, and can support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today. So pigs know how to tell.
Yeah, the best pig.
The best pig.
I mean, I don't know if that's...
They're not trying to usurp it.
It's the best pig for the alpha role,
Sure, yeah.
It's pretty cool. So that's the pig, by the way, that is most comfortable on its own, which we've talked about before. I know I talk about pig psychology way too often, but if you have to pick, you want that to be the last pig that you slaughter because he's already alone, he or she, at the top of the hierarchy. And so leave that pig to be the last pig, which takes a little bit of self-control, because that pig is going to give you the perfect shot right when you pull up, because they're the boss. So they're the one that tends to walk up to you. They're calm. And again, calm pigs always invite killing because it's like, oh, it's an easier shot. It's going to be easier. I'm going to aim for the pig that's holding still, which you just kind of do naturally without thinking about it. But you might have to deny that right when you pull up in your slaughter truck, for example, to harvest pigs, and instead shoot the pig that's in the back of the group and is already a little more antsy. Not because they anticipate death with their proleptic imagination, because they don't have that, but because they just your presence, their flight distance is more sensitive. Those pigs that are at the lower end of the hierarchy. And if left alone, I would say they're more dependent upon the presence of other pigs for their equanimity by a lot. They will start testing the fence, and they might even get out if they're alone. So shoot that pig first. That's as calm as it will be all day. Anyway, those are elements of the natural law in pigdom that I ignore to my great detriment.
Yeah.
Right? That really messes with the day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the same can apply to humans too. When we ignore the cues of nature, we are not better off. We might think that we are. We might get that little bit of dopamine rush or gratification or pleasure by circumventing them. But I mean, just we've found in our own life, our own marriage, our own your career, when you observe these cues, I mean, it's part of actually the eternal law. It's how we participate in God's plan. Is by observing this. And the closer we are in line with these natural cues, the happier we'll be, because we're sawing like a saw, you know. We're humaning like a human. And that doesn't preclude suffering. But we equate suffering with morally bad. And that might be something we have to let go of.
Definitely.
That's part of it. I'm sort of bringing this up at the very end of the podcast, but that's sort of a big
human suffering
assumption as part of it. So, because natural law does include either death in the case of pigs, or, you know, I mean, we live in a fallen world, so there's a certain amount of
So that's
decay.
why I would say, like, technically, I don't think death is part of the natural law.
Okay. Well,
but in the flexibility of the natural order, it's been able to accommodate this thing that is death. And it's only really as a result of, thinking theologically consistent with the biblical narrative, but also, man, it is clearly a disruption of an order to kill an animal, even done well, even done really well. It's as much as we try, we are defacing an order, and that is because the animal is ordered to its own survival. Its nutritive power, its desire to eat is ordered towards its own good, the good of its body, and we take out, and the good of survival, and we end that, which is why you actually, I can't get over it is so brazen to kill an animal. It is an assertion unequivocally of the hierarchy that we've been talking about. Even if you don't believe it conceptually, it's unavoidable. You are asserting the fittingness of the death of that creature for your life. And that's why you have to have a value system, a principled value system that is based on an anthropology that asserts your worth over the animal in some way, or accounts for that.
Well, when you talk about altar building, which includes killing animals as a sacrifice, I just realized that Adam never erected an altar. It wasn't until, did he?
I don't think so. Yeah.
I have to check on that, but I don't think it was until Cain and Abel that they built altars, and that was post-fall. So I think it could be, I have to think more about it, but that's part of that system, post-fall, but also part of the redemption too. This is the way that we have right worship and get our faculties back in line and give justice to God and all that. Because at the very tippy top of the whole hierarchy and order, the whole kit and caboodle is God. So we have to make sure that we're attending to that part of the order too.
Yeah.
And killing animals is kind of the best we had for a while. Like we give the best that we have out of due reverence and just a gift.
Yeah, well, and I think it was explicitly a memorial. Like that's that sacrificial language that they would use. A memorial of the cost of choosing to violate the order. Fully conscious, choosing to violate the order. Because it's not just an order, it is it's the divine reason that orders the cosmos. So it's literally it is the divine law. Natural law comes from divine law. And so if you are violating that, the consequence is death. And so you have this whole Levitical sacrificial system that incorporates death as an analogy that is also kind of real of what the consequence of violating that order is, of the S word, of sin.
Yeah.
That's what it leads to. Like that, it's just as night follows day. That is the consequence. That's why it's so natural. It's cause and effect. When we violate the order, we get death.
Yeah.
One of the most, I don't know, I happen to think, and I'm biased because of my what I do for a living, but one of the most ordering things you can do is to take death rightly, because it's here. It's here. You know, whether we like it or not. It's not. That doesn't go away until the end. It's conquered. But at least in the animal world, like to do that thing that was the greatest, violation of the original order, you know, things weren't supposed to die. To do that well now, post-fall, is an incredibly difficult thing. And it's hard to overestimate, I think, that the ripple effects of doing it well now. You have to have a worldview. You have to have a philosophy, I think, to do it fittingly, to do it well.
Yeah, I like that you're saying it's a brazen act too, because you are recognizing in that act that you have a cost.
Yes, right.
And on the material level, you need nutrition.
Yeah.
And then, but all the way up to the moral level, you've cost the creator, you know, because you haven't followed that order that he gave us. And so, and then all the way in between, you know, like we are biomes, we have a germ load.
We create waste,
carbon footprints, all of that. Like we're not trying to escape that. And although the modern world wants us to believe that we must do that, live austerely, have no children, have no cost to anyone. Just
you're a disembodied mind.
Yeah.
Consuming prepackaged foods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most unfortunate and detrimental things about urbanization is that it erases the weight, the burden that we are as beings on the earth and as a part of the natural order. It allows us to indulge in the fantasy that we aren't a burden, that we can actually be vegan. And I don't have anything against, I don't mean to like, go after vegans or anything, but there's just a very fundamental fantasy there that is it doesn't work. It gives you it allows you to indulge in your own innocence. Mm-hmm. I think of it as a Puritanism. Mm-hmm. It's an extreme Pharisaism that you're not killing things all the time just so you can exist, and that is not real. That's not the reality.
Yeah.
As we know, like even if you are a vegan, there's countless numbers of animals being turned in the combines that are harvesting your soy products. Mm-hmm. And not to mention the destruction of our prairies where we grow the soy and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. But the cost of urban existence is huge, but it is constantly and efficaciously deferred and removed from our consciousness. Mm-hmm. So we can actually think that we're not part of the food chain, which is weird. Mm-hmm. That is a fantasy. It's not real. Mm-hmm. And it's much better to come to know your existence as a result of a chain, of an order. Mm-hmm. Lest you harbor any illusions about your own purity, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, purity illusions are dangerous things.
Yeah.
I'm not calling vegans totalitarians, but a lot of totalitarian leaders were vegans.
That's true.
Vegetarians. And the point of that is it's a Puritanism. Mm-hmm. It's part of that illusion of control. Now, I know a lot of people are vegan or vegetarian just because they object to the way all the meat is produced that comes into the city. Mm-hmm. And I get that 100%. Mm-hmm. That is consistent. That makes sense. All the meat comes from tormented animals in a centralized farming system, so I'm not going to participate in that. I'm just going to eat vegetables until I can get out and raise my pig. So they take our classes. I'm not talking about that. But it's just part of the fantasy that you can exclude yourself from the order.
Right.
That you're not part of it.
There you go. Yeah. It's just...
Or the law from the natural law.
Yeah. Well, when you enter into the fray and enter into the order and you decide to kill for your own sustenance and the sustenance of your family and your communities, that's sort of the birth of culture. And I mean, just leave it to God for us to drastically mess up. And then we have this system of sort of making reparation by making sacrifices. That at the center of that, and then the New Testament is born, and then we've got the one holy,
the
amazing
law of love,
right? That from the center of that new cultus where we have worship, that's the epicenter of all of culture, and I don't see that happening with veganism. I don't see culture like waves and shock waves of culture springing from that. That's just one example. But I mean, when you arrive at taking on the burden of, only them as has them can miss them, or only them as shoots them can miss them, or like you're taking on this responsibility.
Yeah.
And you're not denying that you and your actions have not always been pure,
right,
or whatever. That from that then happy fault, we have an abundance. Like we're actually in a better situation than we were had we not fallen.
It's actually
ironically.
That's right. Because the funny thing is, when you take on these harder tasks, because ultimately, well, I don't know, just that principle, only them as shoots them can miss them. Meaning, you're only going to possibly miss your kill shot with a pig and shoot them just to injure them, which is horrible. That's only going to happen if you are shooting a pig. So if you're taking on this larger burden and this larger responsibility, and the thing is, you're going to miss. And you know what? It's going to be because you were lazy that day. Or you drank too much last night and you had a headache and your hand is shaky. or some totally reprehensible, horrible reason.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's good for you.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to deal with that. Be like, God, I thought I was pure. I thought
guilt-free.
I was really gonna do this, and I was gonna do it well because I'm the type of person that does this virtuously and thoughtfully and well. Well, congratulations. You've learned something about yourself.
Yeah.
And that little bit of mortification at the unsuccessful dealing of death on a pig, that's really good for you. That's a reminder that you're still in the order, complete with all of your limitations and your errors, and that it's going to be, you've chosen a harder thing. It requires striving for you to be part of that, to live in accord with that natural order. You can't slouch into it. You can't shoot a pig in sweatpants, just like you can't go to mass in sweatpants. But
yeah,
I don't want to slouch.
Well, thank you for sitting here with me and chatting about one of our favorite topics.
Yeah.
We've kind of skirted around the issue a little bit in other podcasts, but I wanted to give a little more fleshed out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't feel like we've skirted around it. I feel like I still don't know how. I'm not a natural law expert at all.
Yeah, we're discovering it still too.
I've always tried not to say what I don't know. But
yeah, and I always do.
Sometimes.
I do more than is good for both of us.
No.
Yeah. What was I going to say before we ended, though?
I'm going to cut you off.
No, that's okay. So we'll end here because you have a hard and fast stop, which you don't normally have. But let's talk about this more, actually, maybe. And I thought I can think of probably 3 or 4 people we could get on this podcast and interview them and get their take on natural law even. I mean, we are farmers, and many of our listeners are homesteaders and farmers, and we deal with nature all the time. And so I think it's really inspirational and educational.
And if it weren't that I have found being aware of the natural law to be so concretely useful, I wouldn't talk about it so much. But literally, like, it is, when you're farming, I'm sure anyone who's farming knows this, it's your bread and butter. Like, that is that awareness, being able to be aware of the order that surrounds you and to work with it rather than against it.
Yeah.
You're doing that every day, all day. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Thanks, Meatsmiths, for listening to our take on all things meat making, householding, and culture keeping.